You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dare to Love podcast. This is Christian Peterson talking. I'll be your host today, and today I have a very special guest that I am stoked and honored to have with me today. I got Jonathan Robinson with me today. So first, Jonathan, before I introduce you, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it, Christian.
Yeah, me too. So Jonathan Robinson is a psychotherapist and an author of 12 books. He's been a frequent guest on Oprah, CNN, and The Today Show, and he is also a professional speaker and life coach. Jonathan focuses on practical methods for creating better communication and more love in life. You can find more about him on his website at morelovelessconflict.com. And his latest book is also called More Love, Less Conflict. And I can add that, as a matter of fact, that same book is right here on my desk, along with another one of Jonathan's great books. So welcome, Jonathan. I'm really excited to talk to you.
We should explore interesting things together, Christian.
I know, I'm sure we will. But hey, first, for those of our listeners who might not know your work yet, maybe would you just start out by telling a little bit about how did you get into this kind of work? How did you get interested enough in relationship and couples and communication to devote your life to this work?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a miserable childhood. So pain is generally a good motivator. By the age of 12, I was looking into self-help as a way to deal with depression. And I found a lot of stuff in self-help books wasn't that useful, but every now and then I'd find something that was very helpful. And it led to me, no matter what was going on in my family, having more peace and love in my relationships. And I thought, well, you can try and control outer things in the world, but the real thing to do is have great relationships and be able to find peace within yourself. So that's always been my focus. And I'm kind of lazy, so I like to use methods that take under a minute to do.
Yeah.
And I found out that there's a lot of lazy people out there like me. And, Oprah liked my methods, so that certainly helped with the sales of the books. But mostly, I did this for myself and then found that I could make a career out of it.
Yeah, that's great. I was actually curious about that. How has making studying this and practicing this and being a author and therapist yourself, what's the biggest way it's impacted your own relationships?
Well, I often will write a book that will point me in the direction that I want to go. So if you write about something and you get known for something, people kind of hold you accountable. So I've been married now 17 years and happily married for 17 years, which is also good. And really, none of this came easily to me. I'm not a natural when it comes to relationships or peace. So I figured if I found the best methods and used them, I would get better, because what's more important in life than finding, more love and peace? So it has made a major impact in that not only do I have a really great relationship with my wife, but a bunch of friends that I really care about. And coming from where I was, which was a shy, depressed person, that's a real miracle.
Yeah, I know. Good job with all that. And I can personally relate to what you're saying about, not being a natural at this. I definitely had to learn it, all of it. And it's funny that you say that. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that, but Sonic and I talk about that too, that, given the work we do, and, we use all our stuff as modeling for our teaching, whether it's in workshops or over the phone or whatnot, that, it's a motivator for us to keep doing our own work, because, we want to walk our own talk, so that keeps us on our toes with keeping up with this great work.
Yeah, it's an occupational perk.
Yeah, it's an occupational perk. I know. And now I want to ask you something else. I know you're a very spiritual person, and I know that one of the other books I have of yours is called The Little Book of Big Questions: 200 Ways to Explore Your Spiritual Nature. Maybe say a little bit about that. How has the spiritual nature of you and life, how's that impacted you and your work?
Well, I have always really tried to find the same things with spiritual methods. How, what really works for me, what doesn't. And in fact, I have a podcast called Awareness Explorers, where we explore spiritual methods that take under 2 minutes to do.
Hmm.
And I think when people find something that works for them, whether it be in their relationships or in their spiritual practice, well, then you have a friend for life. So a lot of people, they only know a couple methods and they don't work that well for them. But I like to give people a lot of options because I find that different things work for different people. In my own case, I used to hate meditating.
Hmm.
You're supposed to meditate. Everybody tells you to meditate. I hated it. It was always hard. And then I found a meditation that really worked for me. It's blissful. So now I can't wait to meditate.
Hmm.
So that changes you when you can always find peace within. That's more valuable than gold. And when you're feeling peaceful, when you're feeling connected to nature or higher self, whatever you want to call it, God, um, then you're also better off in your relationships. You're less needy, uh, you're more compassionate, you're more of a better listener. So I
Hmm.
think that they are all connected.
Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. So I also, of course, want to talk about, I want to talk about couples and communication and love and conflict and relationships because I know you're an expert with a lot of experience in that domain. And I noticed, in I picked down in preparation for our talk here, I picked down once again your latest book from my shelf, and it's a very curious. There's one thing that's very curious is the second line in the whole book in your introduction states that most couples aren't interested in dredging up childhood issues in long months of therapy. That would seem like an odd statement from a psychotherapist.
Yeah, I'm a rather impatient psychotherapist. I like results quickly, and I figure most of my clients do too. I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to go into childhood stuff, but what I find is that if you can teach people really good communication skills, everything else works. It's like a domino effect.
Hmm.
And if they, no matter how much therapy you've had and gone into your childhood stuff, if you don't know how to communicate effectively, it doesn't help. So I like to teach people really simple methods of communication so that when the crap hits the fan, as it will, life is
Hmm.
stressful, you know how to deal with it. And that's really all you need. But most couples have not really studied communication for even an hour in their whole life. And it's an interesting thing because that's what we do all the time. It'd be like, what do you do for a living? I'm a pilot. That's all I do, like 50 hours a week. Well, how much training did you have? None. That wouldn't sound good.
Yeah, right. You wouldn't have too many people flying with you.
Hopefully not. So I like to give people very simple communication methods that they can immediately use. And when difficulty happens, they'll be able to deal with it without my additional help.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. So what do you say? I know in this day and age, people are, at least in my experience of the couples and singles and individuals we talk to, a lot of people have some knowledge of therapeutic ideas and of how one's childhood affects us in adult life. And many of us personal growth aficionados, we have a whole list of knowledge about how our own childhood issues affects how we act now. So we'll often have couples come to us where they will initially start saying, yeah, well, it's because our whatever current our issues are, our lack of sex or our constant bickering, or it's because as a child I was in this so and so situation, or it's because my husband was in so and so situation as a kid. Like, how much is that, like, from your perspective, how much is that valuable, and what would you say to a couple like that who come in talking a lot about what went on when they were kids?
Yeah, I'd say it's about 5% valuable, and good communication is 95% valuable.
Hmm.
So it can be useful, but when stuff happens in a relationship, you're you tend to forget about how your childhood did this. What you really need is in the moment, can you be understood by your partner, and can your partner understand and give you empathy for whatever is going on? That's really the bottom line, because otherwise then you get into who's to blame, who's not to blame. And never once when I've told my wife everything that's wrong with her has she said, "Oh yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That's really helpful." That doesn't happen. But it's amazing how much couples blame each other or even blame their childhood, when what they really need to do is get back to a place of love by being able to fully understand what each other is experiencing.
Yeah. So what do you think that is, Jonathan? When, how does it come to that place when, two people who are initially, most of the time at least, all over each other in love and share such appreciation and depth and honesty and talk all night. Like, what is it that happens between that point and then the point where you or I might meet him, where there's so much blame and arguing and bickering? Like, what happens to get there?
Well, there's been a backlog of stuff, of triggers that keep coming up that they don't deal with successfully in the moment. So then they have to pay the bill, so to speak, because they haven't dealt with all these undigested negative emotions and not feeling fully heard and understood by their partner. So eventually they build up resentments and hurts. And around that time, you and I get to see those people.
Hmm. So would you say is the main culprit is just the either the lack of awareness or the lack of ability to work out like smaller things,
Yeah,
smaller problems?
yeah, over and over again, because people generally lack the skills to fully digest the little things of daily life. It's like if you eat 5 steaks really quickly, you're going to have a lot of undigested stuff to deal with.
Right.
And that's the way a lot of people's relationships are. They don't uh, take time to give empathy, to work out the little things. So they pile up into really big blame blowouts. And
Hmm.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's when it begins. We call it, Sanka and I in our work, we call it, people begin to do what we call complaining for change.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a well-meant attempt to create some positive change, but it always sounds like complaining and blaming to the other person. And yeah, like you said about your wife, it's never happened that she's that she said, "Okay, great. I'm so glad you pointed my awareness to that. I'm gonna go change now."
yeah, yeah. As you've said, the complain, blame, and shame approach to change does not actually work ever.
Yep. I guess I guess I guess we do know that by having tested that approach thoroughly. At least I know I have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I gave a good 300 shots, and
Yeah.
I'm 0 for 300, so I think that's a pretty good test.
Yeah. So when a couple comes to you, Jonathan, who are, let's just say, a very common thing is they don't feel in love anymore, argue too much, bicker too much, feel blamed, not appreciated. Intimacy isn't what it used to be. What's the first thing you say to a couple like that, or suggest to a couple like that? What's your conversation start like?
Well, first, I try to give them hope, because a lot of times people can feel hopeless. They've been putting their hope in the wrong activity, thinking that if I just explained how wrong my partner is, that they'll finally get it. And that's a
Hmm.
hopeless thing. So I say there is hope if you change your communication pattern. And sometimes you might end up even being back in love. You might have been upset at your partner for the last 7 years, but literally, if you change a couple of patterns, you can get back to love in the next 5 minutes. And that's
Hmm.
an amazing thing. So I often start off with simple things like, what what could you say that would be a sincere appreciation of your partner, past or present, if
Hmm.
every time I said, you have a sincere appreciation, I'll give you $500? Could you come up with something? And people
Hmm.
generally come up with a bunch, and they
Yeah.
start off with those appreciations so that they start to feel their heart opening again. And then getting into more vulnerability about, if you look at the word intimacy, it has instructions for it in the word, into me see.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than blame your partner, talk about the difficulty that you're going through and what you really want. And if you can talk in those ways, and I have simple methods that help people in that direction, then things open up very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I know you started saying some ideas for that. I wonder if you'd like, do you have any other good tips for like how to drop into a vulnerable state quickly? Because I'm asking because I know that for many, this is not just couples, just individuals, period. Like that's a really difficult thing. Maybe even more so if you're sitting in a coach's office or you're with a therapist or a counselor to drop into a vulnerable space. What are
Yeah,
your some of your ideas for that?
yeah, it's a really good question. Actually, on my morelovelessconflict.com website, I have something called the 12 questions of instant intimacy,
Hmm.
and people can download it for free. And
Cool.
these are questions that always drop people into a vulnerable, connected state. Some of the questions are very simple, like what gives you your greatest sense of joy
Hmm.
nowadays?
Yeah.
Or what's something that you're afraid to tell me? Uh, questions like this that in answering the questions, you just feel more vulnerable and connected. And they work pretty much 100% of the time. So having really good questions can be very useful. For example, one question is, I'll ask somebody, if people are arguing, if couples are arguing, what's one thing that you are regretting that you've done in the relationship? That will make people more vulnerable, more introspective than answering the question, which people are usually answering, is what's wrong with your partner? And
Yeah.
that question
Right.
doesn't get you anywhere.
Uh-huh. Yeah, those are great ideas. And I'll make sure to put in the notes also where people can go get those 12 questions you asked about because those are really useful.
Hmm.
And that's another thing, by the way, for those of you who are listening. That's another great way. I've used your books. They like really do. They like, in my experience, they really do deliver on the quick practical tips that are just effective and deep and often humorous. I've tried this actually with your book. Just open it at any place and find the next. Just go forward until you find the next tool and just do that,
Yeah.
and it's going to be helpful.
Yeah,
So I
because I don't read a lot, so I want if I'm opening a book, I want it to be immediately useful.
yeah. So what would you say if you were like to bullet point it? From when we talked about what happens between that point of we're all in love to begin with, and then at some point later there's more conflict than love, right? Like your book says. Like if you were to say what are the three biggest missteps you could say or mistakes that couples make that you would tell them to to stop doing if that were possible?
Yeah, well, certainly blame, because blame never works. And if you could just do that, then I think everything else would fall in line. But nowadays, the other thing is really creating connected time. A lot of couples, work is their number one priority, is getting things done. They never make their partner and their emotional connection to their partner their priority. And what I
Hmm.
suggest to people is that you actually schedule that time, because if you don't schedule it, what
Hmm.
happens is your partner gets all your leftover time, when you're
Yeah,
cranky
right.
and tired and not feeling so good. So I try to schedule quality time with my partner, uh, both short and long times. It might be, let's do 20 minutes of quality time.
Hmm.
Or it might be, let's spend all day Saturday doing quality time. But we put it on our calendar and we're responsible for showing up in good shape. So that's something. Uh,
Hmm.
I think another thing is that uh, learning what really helps your partner to feel calm and loving. And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't know what that is. You know, um, I can talk to my wife about anything stressful or difficult as long as I'm massaging her hand,
Hmm.
and she can uh, talk to me about anything, and I'll feel loved no matter what's going on as long as she's giving me a shoulder massage.
Hmm.
So, knowing those little tricks are surprisingly effective, and a lot of couples don't know it really helps to make their partner feel loved.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And I've often found the same thing that if I add a little touch, even if it's just holding hands, that just immediately enhances the both the connection, but also the ability to listen.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I like that you said that you called that leftover time.
Uh-huh.
Because that's like I'd be curious about your perspective on that too, because that is something we of course see, and I'm sure you have seen infinite examples of it. Even I will catch myself doing it. Is that the things that you're suggesting to schedule, like time to connect, time to talk, time to touch, time to have sex, or doing whatever special things we do together. How often and seems to be by default that falls to the bottom of the priority list, and it turns into what you just called leftover time.
Hmm.
Like, why do you think that is?
Well, modern day is very stressful. There's an infinite amount of things to do, and we don't really get that your how your relationship is going is probably the biggest determinant to how happy you are in your life. And they've done studies on this, and
Hmm.
you could have billions of dollars, but if your relationship's going poorly, you're not happy. So
Hmm.
the best correlation with how happy people are is how well their relationship's going.
Yeah.
So if every minute you spent in quality time with your partner, you were given $100 bill, it would be a higher priority.
Hmm.
And in a way, that is what goes on, because when you have quality time, you get inner riches, you get back to the place of love. And love is, despite the materialistic culture we live in, is still the best determination of how happy and fulfilled you are in your life.
Hmm. And I mean, I for one, I completely concur and agree with that. And it seems to me that's one of those things that we hear a lot. Like, I think many people would agree to say, if you ask them point blank, what's the most important thing in your life, or what's the thing you're gonna wish you had another hour for on your deathbed.
Yeah.
No, everybody would say, yeah, it's not. I'm not gonna wish for another hour of money making or of cleaning out my office. I'm just gonna wish for some more intimate relationship with my loved ones. It seems to me that it's one of those things that everybody knows and would agree to, but hardly anyone actually lives by.
Yeah. Well, that's why you need methods, because you have to take what we know. Information is not transformation.
Hmm.
And so that's why I focus on these very simple methods. Like once a week, I take 1 minute and I schedule the quality time I'm going to spend with my wife.
Hmm.
That takes 1 minute, and it's on both of our calendars. I do whatever my calendar says, so
Hmm.
so that's a very
Yeah.
simple method. Another simple method is, and I know that you do this as well, saying appreciations to each other each
Hmm.
day. They have to be sincere, but that keeps love alive.
Yeah.
So this isn't rocket science, but in a way, what you're trying to do is take all your information and say, how can I translate this into a doable action that takes less than a minute?
Hmm.
Because we're all busy and all time crunch. So, but when you do that, you create a habit that is a love habit, and it becomes part of your life. Because I'm kind of a type A person that wants to do things,
Hmm.
and these things didn't come naturally. So I found ways that made sure that I was pointed in the right direction despite my neurotic tendencies.
Hmm. Yeah. And what would you say, if I were to say, like, a devil's advocate argument I've often gotten when I'm suggesting things similar to this, what
Hmm.
would you say to someone who says, Yeah, well, it doesn't really count. It's not really very romantic, is it? If we have to like schedule saying nice things to each other or holding hands or doing a date.
Hmm.
What
Yeah,
do you say to that?
I'd say that you're priming the pump, really. It's very hard to, when you're driving a car, you don't go from 0 to 60 immediately. You go, first you go through 5 miles an hour and 10 miles an hour and 20 miles an hour.
Right.
So you have to keep love and these quality connections in sight. And yes, it would be better if they happen automatically, but when you have these little helpers, they then tend to happen automatically because you're already moving in the right direction.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. So if you were to take from from your vast library of tools and methods that you've developed over, all your many years of work, if you were to take the two or three best ones you would offer to someone listening, what would that be?
Um,
I know that's probably a tough question, but give it a shot.
yeah, yeah. Which of your 400 kids do you love the most?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So, well, I like things that are really simple. So, something I notice about you that I appreciate is, or something about you that I really love is, just completing that sentence is a good start.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Another thing is really being able to give empathy. And I have like an empathy formula in the More Love, Less Conflict book, which is basically, you know, uh, saying it sounds like, and then in 4 words or less saying what they said. I
Hmm.
call it the Oprah technique. Oprah
Okay.
is really good at giving empathy. And she
Yeah.
doesn't repeat the whole thing somebody says. It sounds like you've been put through the ringer. It sounds like you had a stressful day. Or it sounds like you're really loving this new connection you have. That
Hmm.
just giving that and then guessing how somebody feels about something. So it sounds like you've been had a really stressful day. That must feel really frustrating.
Yeah.
That is something that is very important to people, and we're generally pretty bad at it.
Hmm.
Somebody like Oprah, who's really good at it, went from being at the bottom of the heap of society to the most loved person on earth just because she's really good at giving empathy.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
and then the third thing method would be what helps me to get to a place of peace quickly. Make that
Hmm.
exploration. I have 100 methods I talk about in the Awareness Explorers podcast for finding peace, but
Hmm.
it's really not a one size fits all. You got to find what does it for you. One of my favorite methods for me is I rub my dog behind the ears and tell her how much I love her and give her little kisses on her nose. Well, if you're not
Hmm.
a dog lover, that's not going to work for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's cool. I was going to ask you what's your own favorite method for getting to peace?
Well,
I know I'm going to have.
I do like the dog one, but currently what I do is I just kind of bring a smile to my face and my eyes. And I
Hmm.
remember a time where I felt in love with either my dog or my wife or anyone else, and I feel that smiling energy in my heart. So it's like a 1 minute
Hmm.
meditation, and it really works very well for me.
That's great. Feeling the smiling energy in my heart. Love that. Awesome. This is such good stuff. And here, will you say, just for anybody listening, say the name of your podcast again, because I've listened to some of that and it's really insightful and also just fun to listen to.
Yeah, it's called Awareness Explorers, and it's available on iTunes and at awarenessexplorers.com. And I interview teachers like Ajashanti or other people that I find out what their methods are, what worked for
Hmm.
them. They're the experts, so
Yeah.
you want to find out what really works. And I think technology is increasing every year, but people don't realize that inner technology, the methods to get to peace or love, have also gotten better over the years.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people are using time management methods or meditation methods from 100 or 1,000 years ago, and they don't realize that they could get a lot better results today if they learn some new methods for peace or love, which you can get in certain books or or podcasts or things like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Really good. What is it? Do you have a, is there some, let me say it like this. Like, what in your talks with other experts and luminaries, what's been the most surprising to you talking to people like that?
What's been surprising has been that I talked to everybody from the late Mother Teresa to the Dalai Lama about
Hmm.
their favorite methods, and what I found is that you couldn't tell somebody's background by their method. Like, I really like loving my dog. Well, that doesn't make me a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. That makes me
Hmm.
somebody who found something that really works.
Right.
And the same was true even with the Dalai Lama. I asked him what his favorite method was, and he didn't say Buddhist meditation. He said doing little acts of kindness for people.
Hmm.
So I think it's partly involves an exploration of what really works for you, not what works for other people. And but the method that came up the most was the importance of gratitude
Hmm.
for either peace or connection to a higher power or in your relationships. And I was a little bit surprised by that. And in fact, kind of a funny story. Um, I had a friend who came back from India, and he said that he got this magical mantra for helping him feel overwhelming gratitude. And I said, "Would you be willing to tell me what it is?" And he said, "No, no, you got to get it directly from the guru."
Oh yeah.
And I said, "Ah, damn, But I really like the best method, so I went. I flew to India. Have you ever been to India?
I have not. No.
It's really hard to travel there, but it's 18,000 miles away and it's pretty polluted. But I get to India and then I take a rickshaw for 4 hours to the ashram, and then I have to wait in line for 4 hours to talk to the guru just to get this damn mantra.
Yeah. Now I really want to know what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So I finally explained the situation to the guru, and he says in his deep Indian accent, "Ah, yes, my mantra is the most powerful mantra on earth." And he leans in to whisper into my ear. And he says, "Whenever possible, to repeat the following words. The mantra I give you are the words, thank you." I looked at him, I thought he was joking, but he was really serious. And I said, "That's it? I traveled 18,000 miles to get thank you? That's it?" And he looked at me and he says, "That's it is a mantra you have been using. That will take you nowhere. My mantra is thank you, not that's it. That's it will take you nowhere."
Yeah.
So
That's
I'm
such a great
pissed
point.
off at this point. I look at him and I snidely say, "Well, thank you." And he looks at me and he says, "Thank you is not the mantra. You have to say it from your heart. So when you eat good food, say thank you. Or when you see your child or your beloved, say in your heart to yourself, thank you. And soon you will be filled with overwhelming gratitude." Well, it sounds like a stupid technique, but it actually works that when I connect with my heart and I silently say thank you for my dog or my wife or my friends, they really feel it and I really feel it. And that helps to create the energy of a loving relationship. So you just
Hmm.
never know what's going to work until you get a simple technique and you try it out.
Yeah, I totally get that. That's one of my, like what you said in the beginning. So, some of this stuff isn't rocket science. It's pretty simple. And, like for Sonic and I, one of the first things we will give to any couple is, you know, do your best to stop complaining, because that just takes you down, even though it has a good intention.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is share appreciations.
Yeah.
And the first method we use is just do three of them to each other before you go to sleep. So that's the last thing out of your mouth before you go to sleep is three things, just simple stuff.
Mhm.
Thank you for taking out the garbage. Thanks for going to work for another day. Thanks for looking straight in my eyes when you said goodbye this morning. Like anything will do, pretty much.
I'm falling in love with you right now, Christian, just from the.
Yeah, I know it works.
Yeah, yeah.
It really does. So hey, I want to ask you one last thing is in terms of in terms of your work with love and conflict and relationships and couples, like you've been at this for a long time and have, you have taught and written and coached who knows how many people for how many hours, thousands and thousands. What would you say is what's the biggest thing you have learned about love or about relationship?
Oh, so you're going to end with the easy question, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Well, something that stands out to me is how much everybody wants to be understood. It's
Hmm.
really the St. Francis prayer: seek to understand rather than to be understood, because everybody wants it. In our political arena now, there's all this polarization. Nobody feels listened to, nobody feels understood. And
Hmm.
just um, deep listening and knowing that everybody in the end really wants love, but they often do a lot of things that kind of bat it away. So if you're willing to really understand and listen and give empathy, it's amazing how much that heart opening connection can thrive. And when you have an open heart with somebody else, there's few experiences better than that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that is a wonderful note to end on.
Mm.
Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up here?
Well, as I said, I'm really into technique. So if people like really simple things, they can download those 12 questions of instant intimacy at morelovelessconflict.com and give this a try. You might get hooked on it and make intimacy and love just part of your daily addiction.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would also add, go check out Jonathan's Awareness Explorers podcast on iTunes. It's really cool, and it's a lot of thought-provoking stuff, and they're just really cool conversations. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for all the work you do in this world and for being willing to chat with us, with me, and the listeners here for a little bit. We totally appreciate it. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sonic. Thank you, Christian, and it's always been a pleasure working with both of you. And thank you for the great work you do.
Yeah, you bet. We'll look forward to more in the future.
Okay.
All right, that's it for today, friends. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. You have been listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. And hey, if you found this podcast to be useful, would you go ahead and hit the share button and share this with your friends on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or wherever your favorite hangouts are? Thanks so much for sharing the love. And you can find more about our work at loveworksforyou.com. Thank you.